The old woman told her, "You will become a goddess, but never take these off during the day." Adanna thought it was a blessing until she realized it was a death sentence. Listen closely, for the wind carries secrets that the young often forget, but the old always remember. In the dusty village of Amalu, there lived a girl named Adanna whose life was a shadow cast by the sun of others' beauty. While other girls had skin like polished bronze and hair that flowed like silk, Adanna's skin was rough, and her gait was heavy. The villagers were not kind. They called her the unfinished one, whispering that the gods had grown tired while molding her clay. Adanna spent her days near the edge of the great forest, fetching water and gathering dry wood, always alone. She did not cry, for her tears had dried up long ago, leaving only a quiet ache in her chest. She had a heart of gold, but in Amalu, gold was worthless if it was buried under a plain face. Her father was a poor palm wine tapper, and her mother had passed away when the moon was thin. Adanna grew up knowing that the world only looked at the surface of things. She often sat by the river, staring at her reflection, wishing the water could wash away the plainness and reveal the princess she felt inside. Little did she know that fate was watching. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gold, Adanna was walking home. Her bundle of firewood was heavy, and her feet were tired from the long journey. Suddenly, she heard a faint, rasping sound coming from a thicket of thorns. It sounded like a creature in deep pain. Adanna was afraid, for the forest at dusk is a place of spirits, but her kind heart would not let her pass. She pushed through the briars, scratching her arms, and found an old woman trapped under a fallen mahogany branch. The woman was small, her skin like wrinkled leather, and her eyes were as white as goat's milk. She looked as if she had been there for 100 years. Without a word, Adanna used a sturdy branch to lever the heavy wood off the old woman's legs. She then shared the little water she had left in her gourd. The old woman drank greedily, her white eyes never leaving Adanna's face. The silence was thick, broken only by the chirping of crickets. Adanna felt a strange chill, even though the air was warm. She sensed that this was no ordinary traveler, but a being from the deep silence of the earth. The old woman stood up, her bones creaking like the floorboards of an ancient hut. She did not thank Adanna with words at first. Instead, she reached into a tattered bag made of leopard skin and pulled out a small, shimmering piece of cloth. It was a pair of beaded sandals, glowing with a light that seemed to come from within. The beads were the color of the midnight sky, dotted with silver that looked like fallen stars. "You have a heart that sees what others ignore," the old woman rasped, her voice sounding like dry leaves skittering across stone. She held out the sandals to Adanna. "Take these. When you wear them, the earth will recognize your beauty and the world will bow before your grace. You shall be the most desired woman in all the lands." Adanna gasped, her hands trembling as she reached for the gift. The cloth felt like cool water against her skin. But then, the old woman's voice turned sharp, like a knife edge. "There is a price and a rule, child. You must never take these sandals off while the sun is in the sky. If you remove them before the moon is high, the beauty will turn into a rot that consumes everything you love." Before Adanna could ask what the old woman meant by rot, the stranger vanished. She did not walk away. She simply dissolved into the mist that rose from the forest floor, leaving only the scent of wet earth and ancient herbs. Adanna stood alone in the darkening woods, clutching the star-beaded sandals to her chest. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Was she dreaming? Was this a trick of the forest spirits? She sat on a mossy rock and slid her dusty, calloused feet into the sandals. The moment the silver beads touched her skin, a jolt of electricity surged through her body. She felt her spine straighten and her skin grow smooth and soft. Her hair lengthened, becoming a thick, lustrous crown that smelled of jasmine. She walked to the riverbank and looked into the water. A goddess looked back. Her eyes were large and luminous, her lips like crushed berries, and her form was curved like the path of a winding stream. She was so beautiful that the moon seemed to dim in comparison. Adanna wept, but these were tears of joy. She was no longer the unfinished one. She was the masterpiece the world had been waiting to see. When Adanna returned to Omalu the next morning, the village fell into a deathly silence. The men dropped their hoes, and the women stopped their grinding stones. No one recognized the radiant creature walking through the dusty streets. They thought a queen from a distant kingdom had arrived to visit them. When she reached her father's humble hut, the old man fell to his knees, thinking he was seeing a vision of his late wife returned from the land of the ancestors. "It is I, father," Adanna said, her voice sounding like a silver bell. The news spread like wildfire. Adanna, the plain girl they had mocked, was now the most beautiful woman anyone had ever seen. The same girls who had whispered insults now came to beg for her friendship. The men who had ignored her now brought gifts of goats, yams, and fine cloth, hoping for a single glance from her bright eyes. But Adanna remembered the rule. Every morning, before the first light of dawn touched the horizon, she slid her feet into the sandals. She felt the magic lock into her bones. She moved with a grace that made the very grass bend toward her, but the weight of the secret began to sit heavy on her soul. Among the many suitors who came to Omalu was Prince Chike, the son of the great king of the Seven Rivers. He was a man of immense wealth and even greater pride. He had seen the beauties of the capital and the maidens of the northern plains, but when he saw Adanna, his heart stood still. He did not care about her heart. He only cared that she would be the ultimate jewel in his crown. He arrived with 100 guards and chest after chest of gold and ivory. "I will have her," he declared to the village elders. Adanna's father was overjoyed, for such a marriage would mean the end of their poverty forever. Adanna, however, felt a cold knot of fear. She saw the way Chike looked at her, not as a person, but as a prize. Yet, she also saw the hunger in her father's eyes and the needs of her village. She agreed to the marriage, thinking that perhaps beauty could finally buy her the safety she had always craved. But on the night of the betrothal, as the prince tried to lead her to a private garden to walk, she stumbled. The sandals felt tighter than usual, as if they were pulsing with a heartbeat of their own. The wedding was the grandest event Omalu had ever seen. The drums beat for 3 days and 3 nights, and the smell of roasting meat filled the air. Adanna sat on a throne of ebony, her feet tucked safely under her heavy, embroidered wrapper. She was terrified that someone would notice she never took her footwear off. Prince Chike was boastful, showing her off to his royal guests like a rare animal. "Is she not the finest thing in the world?" he would ask, laughing loudly. He never asked her what she thought or what she felt. As the sun beat down on the wedding feast, Adanna felt a strange burning sensation in her feet. The sandals were becoming hot, almost like glowing coals. She remembered the old woman's warning, "Never take them off while the sun is in the sky." She gritted her teeth, smiling through the pain as the prince dragged her from one guest to another. She noticed a strange thing. Wherever she stepped, the flowers in the garden seemed to wilt slightly after she passed. She tried to tell herself it was just the heat of the midday sun, but the fear in her chest was growing louder than the drums. 2 months into the marriage, the prince's wealth began to grow in a way that defied logic. His father, the great king, passed away peacefully, leaving Chike the entire empire. New gold mines were discovered in his lands, and the rains fell perfectly on his crops while the neighboring kingdoms suffered from drought. It was as if Adanna's presence brought a golden touch to everything the prince owned. But as his power grew, so did his cruelty. He became obsessed with Adanna's beauty, forbidding her from leaving the palace so that no other man could look upon her. He grew suspicious and angry, demanding to know why she slept at her sandals and why she refused to bathe in the royal river during the day. "What are you hiding?" he would roar, his eyes flashing with a dangerous greed. Adanna would only weep and turn away, her heart breaking for the simple life she had lost. She realized that the blessing was a cage. She was a bird in a golden room, and the prince was her keeper. One afternoon, he burst into her chambers, his face twisted with a dark, hungry curiosity. He was determined to uncover her secret. "Enough of this mystery," Chike screamed, grabbing Adanna by the arm. He threw her onto the silk-covered bed. The sun was at its highest point, blazing fiercely through the open palace windows. You never show your feet. You never remove these dusty sandals. Is there a deformity you hide? Or is it a charm? Adanna struggled, crying out for him to stop. Please, Chike, if you love me, let me be. It is for your own sake. But the prince did not know the meaning of love. He only knew the meaning of possession. He pinned her down and reached for the silver-beaded straps. Adanna felt the air in the room grow thick and cold, despite the heat. As his fingers touched the magic cloth, a low growl seemed to emanate from the floorboards. With a violent tug, the prince ripped the sandals from her feet. The moment they were removed, a horrific scream echoed through the palace, but it did not come from Adanna. It came from the earth itself. The sun above suddenly turned a sickly, bruised purple, and the shadows in the room began to stretch and twist like living snakes. The prince recoiled in horror as the transformation began, but it was not what he expected. Adanna did not simply turn back into a plain girl. The rot the old woman spoke of began to manifest. Adanna's skin turned ashen and gray, but her face remained hauntingly beautiful, creating a terrifying contrast. However, the true horror was what happened to the prince. As he held the sandals, they turned into two black vipers that bit deep into his wrists. He shrieked as his golden robes turned to rags and his skin broke out in weeping sores. Outside the palace, the gardens that had been lush and green turned into a wasteland of thorns and dust in a matter of seconds. The gold in the royal treasury turned to lead, and the prince's power vanished like a dream. He fell to the floor, a broken, wretched man, his beauty and wealth stripped away by his own greed. Adanna stood up, her bare feet touching the cold stone. She felt a strange lightness, but when she looked at her hands, she saw they were fading. She was becoming a ghost, a spirit of the beauty that had been misused. She looked at Chike with pity. You sought the gift, but you could not respect the giver, she whispered. The palace guards rushed in, but they found only a shivering beggar on the floor and a shimmering mist where the princess had stood. Adanna had fled into the forest, her bare feet bleeding as she ran toward the place where it had all started. She did not want beauty anymore. She wanted her soul back. The forest seemed to recognize her, the trees parting to let her through. She reached the thicket of thorns just as the sun began to set. The old woman was there, sitting on the same mahogany branch, waiting. She looked at Adanna's ashen skin and her weeping eyes. You broke the rule, the woman said softly, but there was no anger in her voice. I did not break it, mother, Adanna sobbed, falling to her knees. It was taken from me by force. I tried to warn him. I tried to protect him, but his heart was a desert. The old woman nodded slowly. The sandals were a test not just for you, but for those who claimed to love you. The prince failed. He saw the star beads and the fair face, but he never saw the girl who rescued an old woman from the thorns. 12. Can I go back? Adanna asked, her voice trembling. Can I be the plain girl again? I would rather be the unfinished one and be loved for my truth than be a goddess in a house of lies. The old woman reached out and touched Adanna's forehead. The touch was like fire and ice at the same time. The path backward is closed, child, but a new path can be opened. The prince is now a wanderer, a man who must learn what it is to be invisible and hated. And you have seen the heights of the world's greed. The old woman produced a new gift, not sandals this time, but a simple wooden bowl filled with clear water. Drink this. It will not make you beautiful to the eyes of the many, but it will make you visible to the heart of the one. Adanna drank without hesitation. As the water slid down her throat, the ashen gray left her skin. She did not become the goddess she was before. She became herself again, the plain, sturdy girl with the rough skin and the heavy gait. But there was a difference. Her eyes now held the depth of the ocean, and her voice carried the wisdom of the stars. Adanna returned to Amalu, but she did not go to her father's hut. She knew that her father had also been blinded by the prince's gold. She went instead to the river, the place where she used to sit alone. There, She found a man sitting on the bank, throwing stones into the water. It was Obi, a quiet blacksmith who had lost his sight in an accident years ago. He was the only person in the village who had never mocked her, because he could only hear her voice. When she approached, he turned his head, a smile spreading across his face. "Adanna," he asked, "is that you? I heard a queen had married the prince, but the voice I hear now is the one I have missed every day." Adanna sat beside him, tears of relief washing over her face. "I am no queen, Obi. I am just a girl who got lost in a dream of stars." Obi reached out and touched her hand. To him, her skin did not feel rough. It felt like the earth that holds the roots of the trees. He did not see the plainness that the villagers laughed at. He only felt the warmth of her spirit. For a time, Adanna lived in peace, helping Obi at his forge. She learned that true beauty was in the rhythm of the hammer on the anvil and the shared silence of a meal. But the world would not leave them alone. Word reached Omalu that the prince, now a crazed beggar, was searching for the witch of the sandals. He believed that if he could find Adanna and kill her, his wealth would return. He had gathered a band of outcasts and desperate men, promising them gold that he no longer possessed. They were moving from village to village, leaving a trail of fire and fear. Adanna knew that her presence was a danger to Obi and her people. She looked at the wooden bowl the old woman had given her, which she had kept hidden. It was now filled with a strange, dark liquid. She realized that the story was not over. The gift had changed her life, but the debt had not been fully paid. She had to face the man who had ripped the magic from her feet. The night the prince's men arrived in Omalu, the sky was red with the reflection of burning huts. Chike walked at the front, his face a mask of scars and filth, his eyes glowing with a madness that made even the bravest warriors turn away. He carried a jagged spear and shouted Adanna's name into the dark. "Bring out the one who cursed me," he roared. The villagers huddled in the center of the square, terrified. Adanna stepped out from the shadows of the blacksmith's forge. She looked small and ordinary in her simple brown wrapper. Chike laughed when he saw her. This is the goddess I gave my kingdom for? This is the creature that brought me to my knees." He did not see the power humming in the air around her. He only saw a girl he could easily crush. He stepped forward, raising his spear high. "Where are the sandals, witch? Give them to me, and I might let you live as my slave." Adanna stood her ground, her eyes fixed on his. "The sandals are gone, Chike. They were never meant for a heart as small as yours." Chike lunged, his spear aimed at her heart. But as he moved, the ground beneath his feet turned into soft, treacherous sand. He stumbled, the spear flying wide. Adanna held up the wooden bowl. "You want the magic, Chike? Then drink from the cup of your own choices." She threw the dark liquid at his feet. As the drops touched the earth, thorns erupted from the soil, twisting around Chike's legs like iron chains. He screamed, but the sound was drowned out by a sudden, violent wind. The old woman appeared in the center of the square, her white eyes shining like lanterns. The villagers gasped and fell to their faces. "The dead is called," the old woman cried. She turned to the prince's men, who froze in terror. "You follow a shadow of a man. Go back to your homes, or be swallowed by the earth that rejects you." The outcasts fled into the night, leaving Chike alone, trapped in the cage of thorns he had helped create with his own greed. The old woman turned to Adanna. "You have used the water of the heart to defend the innocent. The test is complete." She waved her hand, and the thorns around Chike turned into a solid stone statue, capturing his face in a permanent expression of rage and regret. He would stand there in the square of Omalu as a warning for generations to come. The old woman then looked at Adanna, her expression softening. "You have walked through the fire of beauty and the cold of the rot. What do you wish for now?" The village was silent, waiting for Adanna to ask for her goddess form back, or for a palace of her own. Adanna looked at the burning huts and the frightened faces of the people who had once mocked her. She then looked at Obi, who was standing at the edge of the crowd, his hand reaching out for her. "I wish for the village to be restored," she said firmly. And I wish for the eyes of the people to see clearly, so they never value a stone over a soul again." The old woman smiled, and for the first time, she looked beautiful, not like a girl, but like the wisdom of the ages. She blew a handful of silver dust into the air. As the dust settled, the fires went out, and the broken huts became whole again. The fields blossomed with yams and corn, and the river ran clear and sweet. But the greatest change was in the people. They looked at Adanna and did not see a plain girl or a goddess. They saw a leader. They saw the girl who had saved them. The old woman vanished for the final time, but her voice echoed in the wind. The gift was not the sandals, Adanna. The gift was the journey. Adanna walked to Obi and took his hand. To everyone's surprise, as she touched him, Obi blinked. His eyes, once clouded and white, became clear. He looked at the world for the first time in years, and the first thing he saw was Adanna. He did not gasp at her plainness. He smiled at the radiance of her smile. "You are more beautiful than the stars I remember," he whispered. The village of Amala changed after that night. They removed the mockery from their language and replaced it with kindness. Adanna and Obi were married in a simple ceremony, and they lived in the blacksmith's hut, which became a place where any traveler could find a meal and a story. The story of the old woman's gift was told every evening by the fire, but it was no longer a story about a sandals. It was a story about the weight of choices and the true nature of beauty. Adanna lived a long and happy life, never once wishing for her goddess form. She realized that the magic had never been in the beaded sandals. It had been in her ability to love the world even when it was cruel to her. Her children were born with her sturdy frame and their father's gentle spirit, and they were the most beloved children in the land. But even in peace, Adanna sometimes felt a chill when the moon was thin. She knew that magic is never truly gone. It only waits for the next person to find it. Years passed, and Adanna became the wise elder of the village, the one the young girls went to when they felt the sting of a boy's rejection or the weight of their own reflection. She would take them to the square and show them the stone statue of Prince Chike, now covered in moss and weathered by the rain. "He had everything the world says we should want," she would tell them, "but he had nothing that the soul needs." She would then tell them about the night in the forest and the old woman with the leopard skin bag. One day, a young girl named Zola came to her. Zola was beautiful, the most stunning girl the village had seen since Adanna's transformation. But Zola was miserable. She was chased by men who only wanted to own her, and she felt like a puppet in her own life. "Mother Adanna," she cried, "how do I make them see me? How do I hide this face so I can find a heart?" Adanna looked into the girl's eyes and saw the same fear she had once felt. Adanna took Zola to the riverbank and told her a secret she had never told anyone else. "The old woman did not just give me a gift, she gave me a mirror," Adanna said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a single silver bead, the only thing that remained of the sandals after they had burned in the palace of Chike. "This bead does not bring beauty. It brings truth. If you hold it, you will see people as they truly are." She placed the bead in Zola's hand. Zola looked into the water, and as she held the bead, she saw the men of the village approaching. Some looked like wolves, their eyes hungry for her beauty. Some looked like peacocks, wanting her for their pride. But one young man, a quiet gardener named Kalu, looked like a steady, glowing flame. He was not looking at her face. He was looking at the way she cared for the wounded birds in the forest. Zola gasped. "The bead. It shows the heart." Adanna nodded. "Now you know who to trust. You do not need magic to be happy, Zola. You only need the courage to see." However, the silver bead carried its own warning. Adanna told Zola that the bead must be shared. If you keep it for yourself, it will turn into a pebble of lead, and you will become blind to the truth. Zola promised to use the gift wisely, but as the sun began to set, a strange shadow fell over the river. A new traveler had entered Amalu, a man dressed in robes of shimmering silk, carrying a staff topped with a skull. He was a sorcerer from the dark mountains, and he had heard the legends of the woman who once possessed the magic of the earth. He was looking for the silver bead. He approached Adanna and Zola, his voice like the hissing of a snake. "I know what you hold, old woman," he sneered. "Give me the star bead, or I will turn this village into a valley of salt." Adanna stood up, her old bones aching, but her spirit as strong as the day she lifted the mahogany branch. She stepped in front of Zola, shielding the girl. "You have no power here, traveler. The magic of this place is built on sacrifice, not greed." The sorcerer laughed, and with a wave of his staff, the river water turned into black ink. The birds fell silent, and the air grew cold. The villagers ran to the square, sensing a new darkness. Adanna knew she could not fight a sorcerer with strength. She looked at the silver bead in Zola's hand. "Give it to him, Zola," Adanna whispered. Zola was shocked. "But mother, he will use it for evil." Adanna smiled a secret, tired smile. "Trust the gift, child. The truth is a heavy burden for those who live in lies." Zola stepped forward and placed the silver bead into the sorcerer's skeletal hand. The moment his fingers closed around it, the sorcerer let out a cry of agony. The bead did not show him the hearts of others. It forced him to see his own soul. He saw a wasteland of shadows and the ghosts of those he had harmed. The truth was a mirror he could not break. His shimmering robes turned to gray dust, and his staff shattered. He fled into the forest, screaming, pursued by the reflections of his own wickedness. The black ink in the river turned back into clear water, and the sun broke through the dark clouds. The villagers cheered, but Adanna felt her strength fading. She had used the last of the magic to protect the truth. She sat back down on the mossy rock, her breath coming in slow, shallow gasps. Obi came to her side, holding her hand. "You have done enough, my love," he said softly. Adanna looked at the people of Omalu, at Zola, and at the clear, beautiful river. She felt a sense of complete peace. She had started as a girl who hated her reflection and ended as a woman who had changed the heart of a kingdom. "Remember," she whispered to the crowd gathered around her, "the old woman's gift is in all of you. It is the kindness you show when no one is watching. It is the love that does not need a pretty face to exist." As the moon rose, large and silver, Adanna closed her eyes for the last time. She did not vanish like the old woman. She remained in the earth she had loved so well. The funeral of Adanna was the most beautiful day Omalu had ever seen. There was no weeping, only singing. They buried her near the river, and on her grave, they did not place a stone. They planted a garden of jasmine and star lilies. To this day, the people of Omalu are known as the kindest people in the world. Travelers say that when you enter the village, you feel a strange sense of being truly seen. Zola married Kalu, and they spent their lives teaching others how to look past the surface. And sometimes, it is said, an old woman with white eyes and a leopard skin bag is seen sitting near the jasmine garden, nodding to those who pass by with a kind word for a stranger. The gift of the star-beaded sandals is a legend now, a story told to remind us that we are all unfinished until we learn to love. For beauty is a fleeting shadow, but the heart is the sun that never sets. And so, the story of Adanna lives on, carried by the wind and the river, forever changing the lives of those who listen. For more folk tale stories like this, please subscribe to my YouTube channel.